One of the most significant moves the Miami Dolphins made in the early part of free agency on the defensive side of the ball, because we're not talking about Zach Wilson here, was the signing of Detroit Lions defensive back Ifeatu Melifonwu. Hope I got that right. And to discuss the signing, I am joined by the publisher of Detroit Lions on SI, as well as the host of the Lone Wolves podcast, my good buddy John Macaroon. How are you, John?
Alan, I was excited. I thought we were going to talk about the quarterback controversy between Zach and Tua, battling it out at training camp for the Dolphins and Coach McDonald. But look, I know we're here today to talk about the asset that Anthony Weaver and his defense picked up. And I do think that for the Dolphins, when you see an opportunity to sign a player for that contract, I looked at it and said 1 year, less than $5 million for a player that has an upper level upside. I think that's a pretty good pickup value wise after losing one of your key defensive backs. So I look at it from the perspective that the Dolphins made a nice move to go out and get a player that has a high upside and a low risk should the injury concern pop up.
Speaking of injury concerns, now I know he was limited. I believe it was to 3 games last year or something to that effect. He had a couple of stints on IR. Is anything chronic? Is this a guy to be classified as injury prone, or just have the bad luck last year and that's kind of it?
Yeah, no, it's the reason why. Look, Brad Holmes hoards his own draft picks like his children. That's literally what he said. When the Lions do their research on players, they do extensive research. And that's why a bulk of the Lions roster is still in free agency, not external options. It's a lot of re-signing of their own guys. And Ifeatu Melifonwu was part of the Lions' first draft class in 2021, but unfortunately hasn't lived up to the billing. He has been injury plagued throughout his entire run in Detroit. But you saw flashes, Alan. I think that's why, the Dolphins, when they look and say, okay, who's out there, they look at a player of Melifonwu's stature, his physicality. I think he's a tall, physical defensive back that gives Weaver some options should he want to play him at cornerback or at safety. And I know that, the Lions lost their defensive coordinator in Aaron Glenn, but he puts a lot of work to develop the prospects. And I do think that, Ifeatu Melifonwu, what he brings to the table, and I think what Dolphins fans will like, is he's physical. He's able to, I think, quickly read and recognize opportunities in coverage. And I do think there's opportunities for him to be opportunistic to force turnovers. There was a stretch. And yes, the reason why he's not part of the Lions is because he just did not see the field enough. And the quick story on that is he was on IR recovering from a leg injury. And then reporters had not seen this before, was working his way back in the 21-day window and suffered a different injury. So he had to go on IR for a different stint for a finger injury. So multiple IR stints back to back just kind of derailed 2024. His best stretch was 2023, the tail end of that season, where he made plays. We saw glimpses of what he could do. He was around the football, helped out an injury depleted secondary, and really helped down the stretch for a playoff push. Was around the football, very physical. I think can come down and bring some pressure when needed. So I think Anthony Weaver has untapped potential with this player. The only thing that you got to worry about is, can he stay out on the field to meet his potential? If he does, if he's healthy, I think you've, with the contract that was given, you got a high upside player at a very, very low risk.
You kind of mentioned like the ability to do a lot of different things. Could he potentially be a poor man's version? I don't want to equate him to that. Could he be a poor man's version of Kyle Hamilton in terms of the way he is used? Some corner, some safety, close to the box, roaming in the back end.
Yes, he has experience. Drafted out of Syracuse, where he played cornerback, but then the Lions shifted him to safety before they realized that maybe Brian Branch would have some natural abilities there. So he was used all over when he had the opportunity. So I do think that, I looked at it when we were talking prior to this. I thought, you know what? The hopes for Dolphins fans to get the maximized value is you get, a version of Kirby Joseph, who is somebody who's physical, who can recognize plays, who is somebody that can be around the football. Ifeatu Melifonwu made a key interception late in the season in 2023. that helped the Lions win the division. So I do think that with development or with the mix of defensive backs, Ifeatu Melifonwu, I think, has a chance to really be a player that, if he's, again, it's always the caveat, if he can stay healthy, I think this is one of the shrewd moves that the Dolphins have made. I think that you get the highest upside for a player when you risk the least. And I think that if he can stay healthy, there's just opportunities sometimes for players when their first opportunity doesn't go right. You have an opportunity to go somewhere else and flourish. And you hope that for a player that coming out of Syracuse really wanted to prove what in talking to him in the Lions locker room, you get a sense of the hunger that he had and the frustration that he had dealing with these early injuries. But sometimes later in a player's NFL career, things start to click. And I think the Dolphins have a chance to tap into the potential of a good young defensive back.
So there you have it, folks. John is guaranteeing that Melifonwu is going to wind up in the Hall of Fame as a member of the Miami Dolphins. Appreciate the vote of confidence, John. Thanks for your time as always. Check out his work on Detroit Lions on SI.com, as well as the Lone Wolves podcast. Thanks, everyone.